got here at what? 2? Yeah, but this one.
You have to go back to this
Is it still going?
Yeah.
Just to make sure. Yeah. Make sure you take the camera.
Yeah.
Okay, and then head to head. Okay. Okay.
40, 60.
You know,
Yeah.
right?
It was.
We'll talk about it later.
We're taking on the. Yeah.
You need help finding a time.
I don't think so. Now that I remember how to scroll through it. I'm always clicking things and it screws up.
I know, yes.
That's why I don't use that every
Yeah.
Well, I made one of my debaters put a mouse on their computer earlier because I couldn't figure out, I couldn't remember how to right click basically. So.
Yeah.
That had to be like early turns, like I had to like scroll and I was like, this is.
You know how it has a function like if you use 3 fingers and swipe, it turns the page or whatever?
Yeah.
I do that sometimes when I'm talking. I can't use that. I'm like, oh, this is bad.
See, people keep saying.
When I try to use it too, like fingers to like scroll up and down, you know that the navigation, like on the side, and I'm scrolling that and then I'm like stuck. So it's,
I don't know, like people keep making the argument that like Macs and stuff are more intuitive, but it's like when you've grown up with PCs and stuff, like it's like, at what point is it not intuitive
Yeah.
anymore? It's like,
I mean,
I
I
know
love
this
the Mac,
system,
though.
I
Yeah.
have no idea how the Mac works.
As much as it annoys me, I still love it.
I mean, it's convenient, but I'd much rather desktop any day.
To each its own, to each its own.
Yeah. I guess.
Wait, where are you all from?
we go to Georgia, or where are we from, like hometown, or like?
Ah, either or.
We're from GMU.
Yeah, we're from GMU, and I'm from Chester.
Yeah. I'm from Ward.
Virginia?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. We're not.
Wow. Where you guys are at?
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yeah, Wisconsin.
Ooh, in north.
Yep,
North.
Midwest 13. Midwest. Hello.
There you go.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, we're looking out of our comfort zones down here.
Yeah.
Stuck in a southern world.
I can assure you it doesn't get as cold in the winter.
I lost all those, so I'm sad.
Who was the one in Aaron or Chase?
I was born in Chase.
Chase. And who was the one in
Amanda.
Amanda?
Hey, what's your team? Is it
TJ.
TJ.
Coolest name out there. You drop some beats.
All right, this was a pretty enjoyable debate to watch, and I think it was a pretty close debate, so. Thank you, sir. Yep. So I commend all of you. I think my points were pretty decent as a result. I ultimately, and like I say, I'm pretty close, vote negative. I think the AF needs to do a little bit better impact work in the debate with your affirmative. I mean, you spend a lot of time on your case, but you know, I would give them elections and pretty close on that. You could have done a little bit of work in the 2AR, I think, to make my job a little harder on this. But the risk of extinction to the risk of value of life. I mean, you're sort of asserting that value of life is a precondition, so you probably need a card and a little bit more sort of time spent on that claim in the face. That like, there's no reading evidence, and it goes uncontested that life is a prerequisite to value of life, which makes intuitive sense to me. You know, it's not too valuable if I'm not here. So, you know, but there's a lot of like good impacts to like why liberty and autonomy and dignity matter more. So you just need to kind of read those cards, kind of go for it. Maybe put a few more of those in the 1AC rather than all of the preempts, because you're really fast for a novice 1AC.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I was not prepared for it. All of a sudden you went, I'm like,
I'm pretty sure I didn't blow my
I missed like the first 4 tags in the 1AC just because I wasn't quite prepared for what. Normally a novice debate, like I'm speaking faster than the 1AC, so you know that's good. But just I put more impact stuff in the 1AC just to prepare for this, because you run into this, I'm sure, every debate. So, but anyway, on politics, like I don't know that post-stating matters on the uniqueness debate, because they're reading 530 evidence from Nate Cohn. You have the one card from 1031. I mean. So, I mean, it's one day. I don't know that the polls have substantially changed. And the Cohn evidence indicts your evidence's methodology. So, in some ways, I was like, I think just sort of on the method issue, they're saying that your evidence is skewed because it doesn't assume urban populations. You don't really have a response to that. Now, the thing you could have done that I think that could have probably beat the uniqueness, or at least severely mitigated it with a little bit of impact work, is this voter ID argument that you don't really extend it to the car. You extend the cards, but you don't explain it. Like, I think the way you want to explain that card is that even if polls really don't reflect Democrats, that the Democrats can have a field day trying to do the like get out the vote, but it won't matter because voter IDs will discourage those likely voters from going out and voting. So that was sort of what you were arguing at the beginning of the debate. It just doesn't get emphasized that way later. It's sort of that argument gets reduced further and further down to like the 1AR just says, and there are thumpers voter ID, and then in the 2AR you just say, extend our uniqueness cards. You know, I mean, you need to explain that argument a little more, that it's beyond just a uniqueness claim, that it's fundamentally, no matter how many Dems are wildly out there and anxious to vote, that the Republicans have skewed the voting game so that those people can't really get out and vote. I mean, that's the purpose of those sort of voting laws, is to suppress turnout. So, I mean, you just need to explain that it's all about turnout in such close elections, and the GOP have won the game.
With something like voter ID, because I haven't heard that in the debate round yet. So how would you answer something like that, where it's like Democrats are suppressed by like this voter ID thing, so they might not be likely to come out with?
Yeah, I mean, you just need some answers that say that's just not a factor. I mean, there's people that are saying that, despite all the attempts on this, that it's just not going to, that there'll be enough enthusiasm to overcome some of these efforts. I mean, it was the same thing that happened with Obama's re-election. I mean, there were a ton of these ID laws, and perhaps that's the empirical answer, is that, you know, I mean, what it causes people to stand for hours outside, and that's why then the Democrats, like in Miami, went out and bought like pizza and fed people and had bands playing to keep them in line and entertained, you know. So I mean, you know, the other side knows how to play that game too. So I mean, there's some different ways to answer that. But like I said, politics is really close. So I was kind of waiting for you to say it, like I'm hovering to 2AR, like come on. But you know, absent that, I think they're winning a pretty big link debate, that this gets tied to the larger controversy about the ACA, and just generally it's controversial enough to mobilize people to vote against it. And then this debate about whether or not the GOP will support it or not. Your cards are good, kind of assuming status quo. They have the only evidence that speaks to the fact that once they gain Senate control, it's a whole new ballgame. Like their first piece of evidence is good on it. Their second piece of evidence isn't quite that clear on. I mean, it's in fact the way it's kind of highlighted. It's just kind of it's just sort of like one person's opinion, but I think their first piece of evidence is pretty good, that once they gain Senate control, then they just sort of backlash against Obama and shove all sorts of stuff down his throat, this being one of them. Oh yeah, because your second card talks more about like, if the GOP might push it to force Obama to veto it, and then there'd be like a massive PR campaign to screw him. I think your better argument is just, if they win the Senate by a large margin, then the veto doesn't matter, and they can just start cramming everything past Obama. But that's what your first evidence speaks to. So that's the extinction impact. The relations argument, I just don't think, I don't really evaluate it. The neg, I don't think you do enough work on this link level. You sort of extend like that patients won't trust their doctors, that they're fearful that they're going to come kill them. But they just keep extending like kind of unanswered responses back of like, we're an ethical system, there are safeguards, we do improve relations. So I mean, you need to answer back some of these claims that the app's making, that their sort of approach to doing this is uniquely different than typical physician-assisted suicide. Right. So I just think you need to do a little bit more explanation, and also explain like the internal link to like why that decreases disease response. Like I'm assuming what that means is that like if I have like Ebola, like I'm sure as the hell not going to my doctor because they're going to be like, oh, so you're sick, are you? Die. You know, I mean, I guess that would be why your disease response wouldn't be down. So explain like sort of the story of the DA a little bit more. Likewise with the like stem cell, like I didn't read the stem cell internal link, but you don't really explain it, and they're like it's a funding internal link, so I guess I kind of will buy their interpretation of the link because you don't say otherwise. So I don't really weigh this very much. And then likewise with the counter plan, I think if you've got an extinction level impact by the end of the debate and they don't have an impact that trumps it, you don't really need the counter plan. I mean, it's sort of here, and I kind of get that it solves for like some of the, like, this seems like it solves dignity, right? Because they're not in such pain, and there's like a lot better sort of care at the end of their lives. But I don't really know how it solves autonomy, for instance, right? Because that's still like a control over my life decision. So, I mean, it might solve a little bit of the app, but it just becomes unnecessary. Like if extinction outweighs value to life, then you don't really need to solve value to life at that point. So, I mean, I understand why it's in there strategically. It kind of interacts nicely with your patient's DA, but it just doesn't become all that important given that you're, you know, sort of the debate comes down to elections a lot more. So, I mean, like I said, I think strategically you're in the debate. I would read, like I said, do a little bit more impact work on the app in terms of value to life and how liberty and dignity weigh against, you know, extinction claims.
Would you say put that on our advantage and like less solvency then?
Yeah, sure.
Overload on solvency.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's just you need a lot of preamps. Like I don't think you need so many preamps. Like replace the international relations and like one other argument with like 2 more impact cards that are comparative claims to other impacts, and then maybe on politics, like read at least like 1 impact defense argument. Like that. Fair enough. Okay, well, fair enough. I think because if you have a little defense operating on it and you slightly impact a little bit better, then this debate closes up, you know,
we knew from you, like,
fair enough. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, too, is like, I would just read more uniqueness cards. I mean, I think of hearts, despite Nate Cohn, he's a debater, and I know Nate, that I think just, it's hard for me to believe that the Dems are going to win Senate control no matter what. So I think you're on the right side of that debate. Just read a few more cards and a little bit more explanation.
That's why I hate,
you know. Yeah, I was surprised when you read it. I was like, I must have misheard that. And then you read your link, and I'm like, no, I didn't mishear that.
One of our top like varsity debaters sent out like a midterm uniqueness, and like about 85% of it was like GOP, like wins and like answers.
Yeah. So I mean, given that, anytime that you're sort of on the right side of truth, you know, you just bank everything into it. Like here's more cards, here's more cards on it. You know, and also like for 1AR, and this is very sort of like a novice skill development thing, so it's not a bad thing. It's just part of like development. I was a 1A much of my career, and that your sort of like case coverage, and even 2AC a little bit, it's like you're really redundant. Like you sort of explain like they drop dignity, let me re-explain dignity, which is very much like autonomy. And so you don't really say anything new on like those 2 pages or solvency, but it takes you like a minute in the 1AR to sort of get through the case. You should just be like, they drop our case, Their only argument is that the value to life is subjective. It's not, here's these impact cards, now on to the rest of the debate. Or just do like an overview, impact overview. Now,
I just got so
you know,
overwhelmed in the 1 AR. I was like very deep.
yeah, so you don't want case to be the place where you're sort of like spinning your wheels.
Okay.
You just want to get through it. The only thing you need from it's an impact.
Yeah.
To weigh, because they're not contesting solvency other than the counterplan debate and stuff like that. And the autonomy, like I say, I don't think the counterplan even comes close to touching. So I wouldn't even, to be honest, like dignity didn't even really seem like it has an impact in the 1AC. That's much different than autonomy in some ways.
We had them lumped together for the majority of the
Okay.
tournaments we got.
So you
through.
might want an independent impact of dignity. I don't know what that would be.
Yeah.
That's very different than value to life. I mean, maybe like read like there's Petro 74, evidence on liberty, you know, as like more important than everything. And then like dignity could be the value of life argument. I don't know. But if you can separate those advantages a little bit, so they have separate impacts. So like when they read a counterplan and only solves one of them, then you can just shift heavy into the other advantage and say, fine, you win that one, but it doesn't matter, we have this impact.
Did you think our T answers were good enough?
I think so. I mean, I didn't really evaluate the T flow because I didn't honestly understand like kind of the definition level of it. Like I think you're right. I mean, I think you win that, you know, competing interpretations is bad.
Yeah.
And so you win like the theory part of the debate at the bottom. I didn't really evaluate like the top part of it. I mean, and their only sort of explanation on ground is that they lose like a word pick or something, basically. That like the word suicide's important. But I think you just need to be like, yeah, those are bad arguments. Like word picks, kill laughs, like it's bad ground. You shouldn't get it.
I think I kind of said that, but didn't.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I thought you answered it sufficiently.
Yeah, all right.
I mean, I would be hard pressed to probably. Generally, like T debates for me, like the AF needs to be pretty substantially abusive, and I don't think that you rose to that level of abuse for me to comfortably vote on T. So, you know. I mean, I'm not really a competing interpretations kind of guy. For me, T is kind of a reestablishing fairness in the debate kind of thing. So, but it's a very good debate. Like I said, it's really close, and so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Good debate.
Do you all know why the hallways are set up like this?
Why they are?
Amazing.
But from what I can tell, because it's been a while since I've been here, it's like this used to be separate buildings.
They actually,
That makes a lot more
Actually,
sense.
they took separate buildings for the ones behind here. Those are all